Hello everyone and welcome to a interesting video. So if you've been following my channel, then you probably know that I said that BIONICLE Reiterated Season 2 would be taking a couple weeks off and we'd be back in late February. Well, if you're watching this video on the day it's been uploaded, then you know that didn't happen because today is March 1st. And there was no BIONICLE Reiterated Season 2 in February. I do apologize for that. I had to postpone those episodes that I thought were going to be ready because they weren't ready. So instead, we're going to do some commentary over the first season of the first season of Reiterated. So, welcome. The reason that we ended up not having those episodes in February is because my artist it took longer than I thought. And then he thought to get the backgrounds ready for episode 14, which is probably going to be the longest episode of the entire series. At this point, anyway, I haven't written season 3 yet, so we'll find out. But that episode is so extensive and the different backgrounds that it's taking him a little longer than we anticipated. So until he gets done with those, episode 14 will be postponed, which means, of course, I have to postpone the other episodes because, well, I can't skip 14 and then go 15, 16, 17, and then upload 14. That'd be weird. So we're going to hold off on releasing those for a while. Hopefully it won't be too much longer of a wait. But until then, here's a commentary of Season 1 to kind of make it up to you. So here we are starting with the first episode, obviously. Places where you want to start. And this is an interesting first episode. It's really my first time working with green screen at all. And so you can see that there's some problems. There's some problems with that in this first episode. For instance, look at this isn't Vizuna, excuse me. These are the ancient protectors. Take a look at Agarak there. His you could tell that you could see a lot of the keying around him. That was for a couple reasons. One, I hadn't quite gotten down the exact best way to figure out how to key things out, and also for the first two episodes I filmed everything on a different blue screen. I've kept the same green screen all the way through because it's worked out pretty well, but with the first two episodes I had a different blue screen which was much too dark. So then for the third episode and then since, I've used a much lighter blue screen and it's worked out much better. So when creating this series, I knew immediately that I wanted to use the music from the Miramax Bionicle films because Nathan First's score for those films just really helped sell the Bionicle world to me anyway, as well as the visuals. I know that the visuals of the Miramax films are very controversial. Some people love them, some people hate them, but for me, it really... The visuals and the music really sold that world as being more than just a toy, and it's like this is an actual living, breathing world. So that's why we decided to go with the Nathan First music, and also around the same time I was working on the series, Nathan First uploaded all of the scores that he worked on for those 3 films, coincidentally around the time I was working on this. So I thought I was going to have to work with stuff that had been put up on, not Biosector 1, excuse me, the Biomedia Project, which are just little snippets taken from like the DVD menus and stuff, and ripped from there, weren't the best quality. So that really worked out very, very well. So as I've been talking, we've now had 2 TTV cast member cameos. Fweffy from TTV was, of course, Oa, the Ancient Protector of Water. She was in there a little earlier. And then now we have Dead Matoro as Bingzak. And of course, we have series regular Jitil as Nilku, the Protector of Stone here. So another thing with this first episode that I look back and I kind of go at is, again, some of the backgrounds. It's like at this point the keying's better because for the first 2 episodes, when I realized that when I realized how that color blue was not going to work, I went through and with the exception of that little prologue scene, I went through and I actually recolored all of the backgrounds in Photoshop to be a lighter blue, so that's why it keys out much better here in this later bit than it did earlier in that prologue scene. But so that kind of helped that problem a little bit, but then I created another problem unintentionally by the choice of some of my backgrounds. Which is a little unfortunate because some of the backgrounds look really good, but then here in a second we're going to get to a couple that are not the best. And here we are. It's just the tall grass. This tall grass background didn't really work out that well. Just because it more than any other background in the entire show, it really, because of I chose poorly, it really does kind of look like they're just kind of floating on a JPEG, which is unfortunate. The rest of these, you can actually it seems like they're standing on the ground, which is nice, at least to me. I haven't really heard too many complaints about green screen background effects. See, look, there, Vizuna here was kind of just floating over those, floating on that background, which is unfortunate. So the plot of this first episode is really the most... the plot of season 1 diverges from the 2015 animations, which is what this first season is based off of. And I chose to do that so that way we would have kind of an introduction to Otoa through the eyes of the Okotans. We kind of get to see the Okotans as they're living a little bit before, and of course, we get set up to the main conflict with Akimu falling into eternal slumber, which I don't know why they ever decided to call it eternal slumber, since he wasn't actually asleep forever. He eventually woke up. I mean, it was a long time, sure, but he eventually woke up. So, I tried to. So this episode was all about figuring out who the Okotans were and kind of getting a little bit of time with them first, and also kind of building up the Skull Spider threat, because once the Toa show up, they are really just kind of become pests, and they're more of a nuisance more than anything. But to these Okotans that don't have the elemental powers or the built-in fighting instincts, they are really a dangerous menace, and we see that here with how they've taken over an entire village. And then Bingzak having to wear berries over his head was something I thought up during the scripting stages that I kind of wish. Not really. It's still funny, but the main reason I really kind of thought of that is that A, it would be funny, and B, is that the berries would be the same color as the skull spiders that were included with the jungle character sets from 2015. So Liwa and Vizuna came with 2 blue skull spiders. But as I was starting filming, it hit me, oh, I can't use blue skull spiders on a blue screen, so I had to switch it to silver, and that is not something I had thought of. And of course, is there really such thing as a silver berry? I mean, this is a fictitious world, so I could have invented a silver berry for Bingzak to wear over his face, but blue just made more sense. So now we're introduced to some of our main villains from this first year. It's interesting, we kind of get the hierarchy of bad guys here, because for anyone that wasn't familiar with the 2015 story, we get to see the leader of the Skull Spiders, and we assume, oh, this is the bad guy, he's in charge. But then the Lord of Skull Spiders answers to someone, and then here is Kulta. And then there's Kulta's little thing saying, oh, he's not the guy in charge either. There's another bigger bad guy. So when TTV talked about this first season, because I paid them to, thanks to a Patreon perk that no longer exists, Meso, I found this really funny. Meso found Kulta's vocalizations hilarious for whatever reason. That I was the one that vocalized loss. I was like, well, what does a giant spider sound like? Kind of like so. I was glad I was able to bring Meso some joy with my vocalizations of what I thought a giant robotic spider creature would sound like. And then here we get my favorite scene from the episode when the Mask of Time is revealed, and we get kind of a small little cameo from the Unity Duty Destiny symbol from G1. And it pops up a couple places in the season. That's one of them. And so then here we have the Prophecy of Heroes being read. This was actually kind of a tricky shot to have all the protectors in there because, of course, one of them's green, one of them's blue. I can't have them both on screen at the same time because one of them's going to get keyed out. So, if I'm remembering correctly, I think I had the 5 of them on screen, and Kavoda, the Protector of Water, was off screen. So I had to take the one image with the 5 protectors, and then put Kavoda in there, and then remove the others, and then take another image, and then pair them together. So we've seen this a couple times now. That's kind of my version of the Island of Okoto. It's slightly different from the official version we got, also because I redrew it. It's just a tiny bit thinner to just harken back a little bit to the Island of Matanui, which is kind of a long, thin island, where the official Okoto Island in G2 was kind of more squat and fat. So now we move our way on to episode 2. For this compilation, I removed the intros just to help with the flow. But just quickly touching on those intros, of course, very much styled after the beginning of the Miramax Bionicle movies. As I've stated at this point, I was a big fan of those movies, so of course I wanted to emulate that style, music included. So here we have the introduction to all the Toa. First up is Tahu, because he has been and probably always will be the poster child for Bionicle, with the exception of 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, and the first half of 2008. But of course, the Toa of Fire was still the centerpiece of those years, whether or not it was Tahu's. And then second, we get Pohatu. Pohatu I included second because he gets a lot of story dedicated to him in season 2 of this show, and of course in Journey to One in the official story. So he's a very important character. So that's why I chose to introduce him second. With Pohatu's introduction here, it's quick. It's funny. I never intended for this to happen, but Jitil, who voices Pohatu, pretty much voices every Stone character with a couple exceptions. It's not something we ever planned. It's just something that's happened the only reason he got Pohatu in the first place is because he was the only person that auditioned for Pohatu. So then there we had Gali, and then here's Onua. His voice sounds familiar. I've of course voiced Onua. Tahu is voiced by Raptor Talon, beautifully voiced by Raptor Talon. And then Klinda from the BCC is Gali, and then here we have Scorpion Strike as Kopaka. I'm going to be doing a lot of this throughout this commentary, but I love my cast. In some of these cases, they have become the voices. Maybe that may just because I've worked a lot with these voices, having to edit them in and create the episodes. But their voice work and their acting, and of course here's LJ Johnson as Liwa from the TTV channel. The voice work they've done for these characters is so good, it kind of cements them in my mind as this is the definitive voice of this character. For instance, Scorpion Strike as Kopaka. I think that is a pitch perfect voice for Kopaka, in my opinion. And then Raptor Talon as Tahu. There's only been, I think, one official Tahu, and that's what is his name? 10 minutes ago, before I started recording this, I would have been able to tell you guys, but now I can't. I think the guy that voiced Tahu in Mask of Light, he's the only official voice we have for Tahu, and he did a good job. But Tahu's kind of a one-note character in Mask of Light, and then here I give Tahu just a little bit more to do. There will be kind of some patting myself on the back for the writing in here, but of course, Lego gave me a good template to start with. As I've said, either privately to some of my cast members or in a couple different places. the G2 story, I believe, was heavily flawed, but it had a good bullet point. It had a very good bullet point. This is the setup. This is the danger. Here's the Toa and why they come. Yeah, and then here are the bullet points of what happens. It's like, those aren't bad bullet points. It's the presentation that really was bad in 2015, at least. Journey 1, that's a whole nother can of worms that we can get into. And I probably will when it comes to the Season 2 commentary, which I guess I'll probably end up doing someday. So I can't completely pat myself on the back because LEGO did give me a good outline to work with here. But you watch this compared to the 2015 animations. There's just so much more story here. I've looked for it. I don't know where it went, but there was a compilation uploaded on YouTube of the 2015 animations where it removed all the redundancies because, of course, with the 2015 animations, like the first 30 seconds of those 90-second videos would be essentially a recap of what had happened in the previous video. So if you were to actually watch them all back to back to back to back to back to back, there would be a lot of redundancy. It's like, yes, I know this because I literally just watched it. So someone actually took all of those and removed the redundancies and put it all together in one video, and it came out to about 22 minutes. It actually ended up evening out around the same time as an episode of network television would be for a 30-minute time slot. So that versus Reiterated Season 1, which here in this compilation that I cobbled together with removing my own redundancies, with the intros to all the other episodes and kind of putting it in a quote-unquote more movie format. This is just a little under 2 hours. So it's like, yeah, it's like 150% more story in this. I think I improved upon the template that was laid out for me. You guys may agree or disagree. I don't know. I've seen, but I mean, of course, there has been some criticisms here and there, but that's more or less I've seen for Season 1 at the least. But that's more or less from the technical side of things. I haven't really heard too many critiques on my storytelling, which I'm happy about. But if anyone does actually have some critiques of my storytelling, I'd love to hear it. Some constructive criticism would be welcome. See what I can do when it comes to Season 3. But the story, I think, is the strongest thing. Because it's like here in this shot, for instance, you can see that I was still working out how to properly get everything green screened. What lighting setup I needed. It's Season 2 is much better in this regard, but in Season 1 there are a lot of these shadows and stuff. For not really doing anything with green screen at all prior to this, I had worked with it before, but not really much, and not. I think the season turned out rather well for not really having any experience with it. So this is something that TTV brought up that I guess confused them. So they thought that when they talked about the first season, they thought that was Loss speaking. I think Meso specifically said, he makes animal noises and he has like one line, and he found that funny. That was actually Kulta speaking. But it wasn't Kulta. It was supposed to be Kulta speaking telepathically to Loss. But that wasn't, of course, VBBN voicing him. That was me voicing him there, trying to imitate him. Because when I was putting the episode together, I realized that he had accidentally skipped over that line, and I didn't have time to. And because this second episode, because the third episode was the first one I actually got finished. Then I got the first one finished, and then I got this one finished. And when I got this one finished, I had like a day at most before it went live. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a little over a year at this point. So I've been so busy at work with Season 2 that some of my memories of Season 1 are a little fuzzy at this point. So I didn't. The point is, I didn't have time for VBVN to send me that one line. So I had to bite the bullet and quickly record that line. and I was worried that people would be confused because it's like I tried imitating as best I could, but I didn't do, but I couldn't quite because because I love VBN's. I'm just going to call him V. It's going to be easier. I love V's voice for Kulta. He does a great job this season as Kulta. And so it's so distinctive. I'm like, yeah, people are going to get confused by this, but I don't really have much of a choice, and that's exactly what happened, unfortunately. But oh well. Again, most of the complaints I think you could have with the show are more on a technical level and not from a storytelling level, which I will be happy to. I'm very happy about that. It's like as long as the story is rock solid. Official G2 had some good technical stuff, in terms of animation, but the story was garbage. I'd rather have a good story with kind of so-so graphics than good graphics and a so-so to bad story. That's just me. So then here's Makuta's first actual appearance. That's me voicing Makuta, just doing a Lee Tokar impression. Another thing I've lifted directly from the Miramax movies because in terms of definitive voices for characters, it's like characters like Darth Vader. Everyone knows what Darth Vader sounds like. There's no changing that voice. Makuta is much the same way for me. It's like Lee Tokar is Makuta in Mask of Light and Legends of Metru Nui. That's exactly what who that character was. It's like that's the definitive voice. There's no changing that voice. Obviously we have had some different interpretations of that voice. For instance, in Journey to One, which kind of sounded more generic bad guy. Because the thing that I really like about Makuta's voice is that, he does get shouty and has the evil cackle and your typical bad guy things, but most of the time he speaks very softly and slower. That's more of what he's like in Mask of Light. Anyway, Legends of Metru Nui, you could argue that that Makuta in that movie is he even the same character as he is in Mask of Light because of different things, but at least his character in Mask of Light, that very slow, very deep voice, it's like it dripped evil, but there was almost this kind of monotone isn't the right word. There was just I can't really think of what the word is, but there was almost a sense of he was bored. He was bored by these heroes that were trying to stop him, and it's like when he's creating the Rakshi in Mask of Light, he's like, must I release those who should never see the light of day? Like, really, do I have to do this? Okay, well, you forced my hand, Toa. So I really liked that. So of course I'm like, well, I'm just going to imitate that. And since it's my show, I'm like, because it's my show, I'll go ahead and cast myself as the bad guy just because it's my show. I can do what I want. But of course, I did recognize that most of these characters I would need to actually get a cast for, since it's like I don't really want this to have been Golly's voice. So thank you, Clinda, for being my Golly. So then here I thought this is something that's different from Official G2, is that we get to see each Toa find their mask. And so then for Pohatu, I thought that was an excellent moment to introduce the Scorpio. So this is a mock I made. Mock in quotes. It's really just kind of sort of a reskin of the actual Skull Scorpio set. I just changed the claws a little bit, and I put a different mask on him than the one and then instead of the skull mask that he had, and removed the translucent rib cage piece and put on a gray one. So this is what an alive one is, and not the undead version. Because in Official G2, Pohatu's hatred of scorpions, or scorpions, whatever, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's like, why? Why? So I thought Pohatu's journey to find his mask would be a good place to introduce this. Like here, it's like, prior to this, he had no problem with them, but then he gets attacked by a Scorpio, dragged underground, and then after that, he kind of feels uncomfortable around them. I think I would too. So this is one of the shots that when I was writing the show, I actually ended up sketching out that shot where Pohatu and Nilku were looking at the temple in the sand. That's when I ended up sketching out. And there's actually there's a in progress behind the scenes thing on my Instagram account, which will be in the link in the description below. You can see a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff there for various projects that I do. And so that was so I really liked how that shot turned out. So then this is the first mask we see retrieved. See, this is one of these things that I'm really glad I have an actual artist for most of the episodes of season 2, because my background work here is serviceable, but like especially in that instance, the background of the wall and the pillar are the same color, so they really kind of clash, and you don't know where one begins and one ends. So that's kind of And that was kind of like a nice little visual Easter egg there, because Nilku fighting the skull Scorpio, skull spider Scorpio, whatever, was the exact same pose he has in his box art. So when I realized that I couldn't use the blue skull spiders on blue screen, I was like, okay, well then only the blue ones will be the ones that we find in the desert with the stinger tails. Those will be the only blue ones, because in, of course, official G2 there are blue ones that don't have the stinger tail, and there are blue ones that do have the stinger tail. So of course, Jitil, who is voicing both of these characters, does a great job, because they are two distinct characters. Even though he's voicing both of them, you can tell, they feel like two distinct characters, and it's just not a person talking to himself, even though it is a person just talking to himself. So he does a great job. All again, like I said, I'm going to be saying this over and over again, but my cast does such a great job with their characters. So in terms of the episodes and who ended up in what episode, I sort of kind of grouped them by how similar their elements are, or kind of a G1. How did they get along in G1s? Like Pohatu, Onua, those elements, stone and earth, are similar enough that it's like, okay, that makes sense for them to go into an episode. Liwa and Gali, those elements' colors are blue and green, which are very similar colors, because of course blue is a color necessary in making green. So I put those together. And then Kopaka and Tahu, those are the two harshest elements, fire and ice. So that's why I put them together in their episode. So this may be one of my favorite bits of writing in the first season, early on at least. Korgo's little speech, which we'll get to here in a moment. Korgo's speech to Onua about what it is to be a hero, because I was writing this episode and I kind of got stumped on what to do with Onua. And I got to about here where Korgo crosses over. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I don't really know. And I just started writing. Whatever ended up on the page is what I ended up writing. And so then we got this thing here where Onua is afraid of heights. It's like he didn't, and it makes sense that a Toa like Onua would be afraid of heights, because he's not supposed to be high up. His main element is earth. He does a lot of things with the ground, so he spends a lot of time underground. So you wouldn't really see him in a tree high up. So when he sees this gigantic chasm separating in between him and his mask, he's like, oh, I'm afraid of heights. It's like, I thought that was a natural fear for Onua to have, and then it opens up the door for this really nice speech from Korgo, because the Toa come down and they do have all these questions about themselves. It's like, well, okay, we're told we're heroes, but what does that mean? I mean, if I were beamed down to a planet and I had in this island with all these people that were counting on me, and I had no memory of my past life, and I'm told that I was a hero, I think I would have questions too. So I thought this speech turned out pretty well. And the person voicing Korgo here is Lena, who is actually the sister of Klenda. So it was interesting to have sisters in the same show, but then have them voice characters that actually, so far at least, have never met. Which, listening to it, their voices are different enough that even if they were to have dialogue together, I don't think there'd be any confusion. But at the same time, they are still sisters. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have to have them meet in season 3 just to test that hypothesis.
Look, there's a pattern to the stones. If you time it right. No time.
So Onua jumps up there, grabs his mask, and then this is again where some of my effects for these early episodes aren't really that great. It's like, yeah. Looking back at that could have turned out better, but of course, I haven't really done anything like this before, so I'm actually still kind of impressed it turned out as well as it did, because there's all these shadows here. That turned out okay, but still there's problems with the backgrounds here, like a bunch of shadows pop up there. So again, I'm very thankful that I have an actual not an animator, an actual artist working on backgrounds this time around, so that way it's made it easier for me to do different effects, because I can focus on the effects and not how they blend into the backgrounds, because the backgrounds will already be preset. And so then here we have our introduction of Skull Basher and Skull Slicer. They don't really do too much this episode. It's just kind of introducing them, and I think really all they do is Skull Slicer laughs and jumps off, and that's it. But it's like it's their introduction, and of course we get more Makuta talking with Kulta. Just the bad guys kind of discussing how things are going. And then this is something I didn't really notice until I was editing this episode, but one of Kulta's horns is crooked, so it'll cut back to him here in a second. Okay, Makuta's very long-winded. He's a very long-winded bad guy. And there we go. There it is. You can see one of his horns is crooked, and that really irritated me when I was editing this. So it's like, oh, dang it. Why didn't I catch that when I was filming? Slicer was a very, very fun figure to quote-unquote play with for this series because of the 4 arms. So I really had a fun time. It's like he can have different poses because he can have his arms crossed like he's upset, and his arms in his hands on his hips at the exact same time. So now we're on to episode 4. Yes, episode 4. That's correct. And then we get a lot of Liwa this episode. So a lot of LJ. So if you guys are fans of the TTV podcast, which chances are you may be, because after they talked about it on their podcast, I did notice a spike in views for Reiterated. So there's a good chance that you're watching this because you listened to that podcast and then came here. So I hope you're enjoying the series, and thank you for coming to watch it, because they said to check it out. So I am the voice of Vizuna. It's just essentially my natural speaking voice. That wasn't the plan for me to be Vizuna. Vizuna was one of the protectors that was up for auditions for the show back when I ran season 1 auditions, but I didn't. But when I went through, basically almost everyone that auditioned, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 people, ended up getting a part. So then when all was said and done, and the reason the 2 or 3 people that didn't get a part is just because their mic quality just wasn't up to snuff, really, I thought. So I had this list of this almost completed cast list in front of me. I'm like, well, who's going to be Vizuna? I'm like, okay, I guess that could be in it, because the protectors get a lot to do compared to what they had in the official story. But even then, they're side characters, so they're not the main characters. So I was like, it's a side character. I don't feel like I'm hogging the spotlight too much by taking a side character. It's basically I'm doing it out of necessity more than showboatiness at this point. So then this was a neat concept, I thought, where the mask powers started to affect the environment around them. So that's why the volcano that Tahu's mask is in is the Great Volcanoes, because it may have been a regular volcano when the mask was first planted there, but then through the years, the volcano's grown and the lava has risen because that mask is there. Same with Liwa's mask here in the jungle. Yeah, the tree that houses it is still living because it's feeding off of that mask energy, and then the plants around it are kind of alive, which may or may not be a nod to the Morbuzak from G1. With the idea of this vine that lives. I didn't intend that. I didn't intend it as that, but just now discussing it, I'm like, oh, that's actually sort of kind of like the Morbuzak. But of course, these vines aren't sentient like the Morbuzak was. So So LJ, I was very, very happy that he agreed to do this series because, of course, he had said on TTV for ages that if anyone has a fan project and they need a voice for Leewa, to ask him to help out because Lee was his favorite character, and he wants to be a voice actor. So any practice would be good for him. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised he said yes because he's of course very open to voicing Leewa in fan projects. But I was so very happy and grateful when he agreed to be Leewa, and I think he does a fantastic job. So like that bit earlier where it's like they may know how a protector thinks, but they have no idea how a Toa hero thinks. It's like that felt so very Leewa to me. The way, of course I wrote it, so of course it would feel Leewa to me, but his line delivery just works so well. Again, my cast does a fantastic job. So then here, of course, we have the silver skull spiders instead of the blue ones because you can't have blue on a blue screen. So this, of course, was then filmed on the newer blue screen, which is a lighter blue, which works much better on my camera. And so I was able. So these I didn't have to go through and recolor. Of course, at this point you could, it's like in top right corner you can see the little. I'm not even sure what to call it. I'm going to call it a smudge. It's not a smudge, but you can see that little bit there that wasn't completely keyed out. I was still kind of working on perfecting my method of green screening and / blue screening. And in season 2, it's still not perfect. There's some shots that there's just the light bounces off the toys in certain ways that or there's shadows that I can't really help being there, that it's still not perfect, but it's a whole lot better in season 2 than it is in this season, just because I've really kind of perfected my method of how it works. Also, a big difference between season 1 and season 2 is season 1 I filmed everything with the green screen and blue screen using a Lego box it was the 2016 Clone Turbo Tank box. That was the box I used to drape the cloth over. And so it only allowed me to have a couple characters on screen at the same time without the shots becoming too crowded, and then it could only be so tall. Season 2, I very wisely upgraded to a much larger display, which was kind of this wooden dryer rack that you could air dry clothes on. And so I just put up my cloth on that and then clothespin it to there, and it allows me a much larger area to work with. And I think that's also helped with with shadows and stuff. So this part of the episode of Golly, I wanted to change things up a little bit because you can look at these early episodes and they are kind of formulaic. Is that Toa and Protector go to find a mask? They run into problems. They get mask. Toa gets mask and leaves to find a Himu. And of course the problems being skull spiders, with the exception of Golly. I wanted to, because the last three Toa we had just seen had all been having problems with skull spiders. It's like you would expect, because of course that's the way it was in the 2015 animations. They all encountered skull spiders, but it worked better then because, in quotes, because you didn't get to see all of the Toa find their masks, so it didn't feel as repetitive because it really focused on Tahu and Naramoto. But this time we are focusing more on each character individually, and so to repeat the skull spiders again, starting to feel a little tiresome. So I changed it up a little bit, and threw in this Sea Beast, which was a mock that I made, which is kind of a combo of Takedox and Vampra, and then Mazeka's turret from 08. Swimming turned out okay here. Underwater stuff I always kept very brief, just because of the technicals and all that stuff that goes into making underwater stuff. Because if to have someone to swim, I had to build a rig to put them on, and then I had to work on keying out the rig. So it's actually twice the work to do underwater scenes. So the underwater scenes in both season 1 and season 2 ended up being shorter than stuff for their land-based counterparts, which is a little unfortunate, because underwater is a very interesting location to be for Bionicle, or really any storytelling medium, because we as humans, we're so we're so used to being on land that doing anything underwater, it puts us out of our comfort zone. It really the environment just completely changes. So that's one of the reasons I like 2007 so much for Bionicle, is because everything was underwater. It was a very unique setting. So I would have liked to do more underwater stuff, but just by necessity I couldn't. So, which it's unfortunate, but oh well, what are you gonna do? So this is really the first time we get a lot of Skull Slicer speaking, and gosh, I love his voice so much because it's of course reminiscent of the cackle. I guess the cackle that, because isn't that really all we get in the G2 animations, is just his cackle. I don't really think he does he. See, that says something about the G2 animations. I'm even questioning if Slicer had speaking lines in the 2015 animations. So anyway, I like Skull Slicer's voice. So Kopaka here, this was another one where I tried changing things up a little bit. Of course, he and Izator do encounter skull spiders, but it's not until the very, very end. They face more threats from the environment, because with maybe the exception of the region of fire, the region of ice is the least hospitable region, just because it's all mountainous and it's constantly snowing and all that. So this, of the 6 Toa, this may be my favorite Toa go to find their mask section, because the ice characters have always in Bionicle have always kind of been these philosopher types. Like with Turaga Nuju, he was this wise old sage that only spoke in bird chirps that Matoro had to translate. And of course, all Turaga and G1 were wise, but Nuju especially kind of had that kind of kooky mentor type vibe to him. And of course the ice characters have always been a little more reserved. Just be partially, and so I've always looked at that as like, well, of course they would be. They're forced to live in the cold, so of course they would be a little more closed off. So I kind of worked that into the dialogue here, and I really like the way Scorpion Strike and Loca-Cola here acted out their scenes. Loca was actually a late addition to the show. He's a friend of mine that I met on the TTV PSN fan community, where we play on the PlayStation Network, and we're all fans of TTV, and so we do game nights occasionally. So at this point I'd known him for a couple years, and the person that was supposed to be voicing Izator just kept having scheduling conflicts, and it wasn't going to work out for him to be Izator. So unfortunately, I had to recast. So I'm trying to think of who to recast. I'm like, well, I don't want to voice another protector, because I couldn't really think of a voice for Izator. And then we had a game night, and I'm like, and then Loca is from a similar area of the world as Scorpion Strike is, I believe. Loca-Cola is from Sweden. And I think that's where Scorpion Strike is too. I can't remember exactly. So it's like, oh, actually they've got similar sounding accents, so let's put them together, because it would seem like that they would be from the same region of Okoto. So that was very fortuitous, and I'm very pleased with how this stuff with the ice characters has turned out. Loca's kind of monotone delivery does works very well with the ice characters. And then the music, so this is something I had that TTV kind of had a critique about, is that the music was too loud in places, and this is a place where it really shows. First season has problems. It has a bunch of technical problems that I've thankfully solved in season 2. Of course, some of that's been the green screen stuff. Other stuff, another one of those issues has been volume. Sound mixing, I was pretty new at. I've been making videos for at this point. Let's see, these episodes were coming out in late 2017, early 2018. So I've been making YouTube videos for 8 years at this point, but I had never really given too much heavy, considerate thought at this point to a lot of sound mixing, mostly because I just never had the ability to. Because BIONICLE Reiterated is actually the first stop motion series I've done that's almost completely edited in Premiere Pro. Before then, it was always exclusively Windows Live Movie Maker. Now I still use Movie Maker to put the shots together and add in the dialogue, but of course Movie Maker does not have the option to do any blue screen, green screen, keying stuff. You can't really work with multiple audio tracks at once, so Premiere Pro became a necessity for me when it came to doing this show. So I still use Movie Maker to put all the scenes together, because I find it easier because you can individually select each frame and edit the amount of time it ends up on screen. It's just maybe it's just for me because I was so used to Movie Maker at this point. I just found it quicker and easier to do that than to edit it all in, like, say, an actual stop motion program or Premiere Pro. So it's a mix, between programs. But most of the heavy lifting, editing wise, is done in Premiere Pro. So this first season I really did experiment a lot with doing audio mixing and trying to make sure everything balanced out. Season 2, much better on that front, but Season 1, there are a lot of instances where it's like, what are they saying? The music's too loud, I can't hear. So unfortunate, but again, I hadn't really done any of this stuff before, so it's one of those things. It's like, actually, it's kind of annoying, but it's not half bad. It could have been a lot worse. It's actually impressive. So then here we have the last Toa to gain their mask. We're about halfway through at this point. So here we have Tahu and Narmoto. Again, Raptor Talon voicing Tahu here, doing a superb job. This, while I think Kopaka was my favorite of the Toa getting their masks, this one may be the most interesting. But it really became the most interesting afterward when I listened to TTV's coverage of Reiterated Season 1. Is that I don't really think saying that they did not well, actually, yeah, I can't say that, because as Miso put it, it's like it's a little uncharacteristic for Tahu to kind of be being this nice. Of course, this isn't G1 Tahu. He is a different Tahu. So if this was G1 Tahu, maybe that would be more of a criticism. Is like, this is very uncharacteristic for Tahu, but this is a different Tahu. He still has many similarities to G1 Tahu, but it is a different character. It's a different interpretation of that character. But as Meso put it, there may be some things that he does differently that Tahu in the past has not, Tahu that we've known in the past has not done. But there's enough character work done here that he bought it. So that's something I very much appreciated listening to the coverage. And so it's funny, Jitil may be the voice actor that plays the most characters, and that's kind of something that just sort of happened and wasn't something that was ever planned. Because, of course, in Season 1, he is Pohatu, Nilku, and Narmoto. And see, it gets to the point where I forget what characters Jitil plays, because it's like, oh yeah, he's so many of them. So I think he's just those three in Season 1. But then, of course, comes Season 2. Spoiler of Season 2, but at this point, if you haven't been... the first 4 episodes of Season 2 are up, as I explained. This is going up because the last 4 episodes are not ready, and I apologize for that. So if you haven't seen those episodes, then it's your own fault. They've been up for a while. Go watch them. Pause this and go watch them. In Season 2, he, of course, then also voices Akmu. Or Akmau, however you want to say it. It's one of those interesting Bionicle words. It's like, how is this pronounced exactly? Like Vizon. It's like, it looks like Vizon to me. I typically say Vizon, but the official canon pronunciation is Vazon. Same with like a Nika. Like, you watch the commercials for the Toa and Nika. I still say Toa and Nika because that's the way the commercial said it. It's like, new Bionicle presents Toa and Nika, each set sold separately. But then the official pronunciation is Anika, and then it gets even more confusing because then the Mask of Life is the Kanohi Ignika. It's like, maybe the Toa and Nika should be the Toa and Nika, not the Toa and Nika, because it's so similar to the Ignika. It's like, Bionicle. Oh well, it's kooky and crazy, and that's one of the reasons I love it. So this is something that, I mean, this is pretty much straight up what happened in the 2015 animations. As Tahu goes down into the lava on his surfboard to grab his mask, and then of course, of course, the whole thing with BIONICLE Reiterated is I'm retelling the story and doing it better. But there's some things I had to keep for it. Whether for the meme, just do it for the meme, or just because I legitimately liked it. So like Kopaka slips and he goes, "I didn't slip," and then Tahu there went, "I can feel the power." So another instance of me really liking the Skull Slicer toy because of that's just kind of a funny pose. It's like he's got his arms crossed. He's got his arms crossed there, but then two of them are just kind of hanging there. It's like, that's a very casual. If I had been using a sturdier background to drape the green screen on, well, actually, this is a blue screen because Slicer wouldn't work on a green screen. To drape the blue screen on, then I would have put his foot up on the wall to just be that much more casual. But I tried that, but I kept knocking it over. So I'm like, okay, can't do that. Oh well. So this is so since the Toa have been here, the Skull Spiders have been getting mauled. They haven't been, they just haven't been as effective as they have in the past because the Toa are, they were created to fight. They were born to fight. So, and they're much, much larger than Okotans. So now, Kolta and Mukuta have really just kind of had it with the Lord of Skull Spiders at this point. So it's kind of an ultimatum. It's like, you better beat them. They're on their way to the city. You better get them, or else things aren't gonna turn out very well for you. Another just an absolutely great laugh. Raptor Talon has such a great laugh for Skull Slicer, because it's like, that was like the one defining characteristic of Slicer from official G2 was that he cackles. He cackles, I guess. Again, like I said, it's like, did he speak? I can't remember actually. So, and so Kolta sends, but that's the thing. Kolta and Makuta have had it with Lost at this point, and they know that Lost isn't gonna be able to beat the Toa. So this is the beginning of the end. Lost is gonna go get his tail kicked in, and then in Kolta and Makuta's minds, they're gonna win this battle. And then the Toa will be defeated, and then Okoto will be theirs. Of course, that's not how it goes, because good always wins over evil. So then, this is something that I added just to add stakes to this episode, which is where the Earth Okotans are under siege from the Skull Spiders, and they end up being used to attack the Fire Okotans, just to add a little, because if we didn't need more stakes, just add some more stakes to, and well, not really even more stakes, but a sense of urgency to the Toa having to defeat Lost. And so then here we have the first two Toa meeting on screen. And so this is definitely something I wanted to do to expand on, because the Toa just kind of all meet up at the city, and then they beat up Lost. I wanted to see them kind of meet up with each other en route. And so we have Pohatu and Lewa meeting first. And so Pohatu in G2 is very different from his G1 counterpart. And so that's another funny thing. It's like Tahu, it's like, oh, he kind of does some uncharacteristic things. It's like, well, again, it's a different interpretation of the character. It's like G2 Pohatu is not the same character as he is in G1. So I thought it'd be interesting to have the arguably the the grumpiest Toa from G2 and the comic relief Toa from G2 meet up. These be the first two Toa that meet each other. Of course, and even then, I think I write the Toa likable enough to where Pohatu definitely has this kind of I'm upset moments, but he is still a very likable character. So he warms up to Lewa pretty fast. It's not like for the entire duration of the show he's always wanting to beat up Lewa just because he's so cheery. So Lewa's movements in this show, at least in this season, I didn't really get as many opportunities to do the same in season 2, but in season 1 at the very least, I kind of gave him some extra animation quirks compared to the other characters, just because of how to me, Lewa is sort of kind of a Looney Tunes character in a more traditional animated character where he's always moving around and bouncing up and down and stuff. And so in his little conversation with Pohatu there, you could definitely see that where I feel like if this were like a 2D animation, that'd definitely be something you would see from Lewa, where he's always zipping around and moving around really fast with a lot of motion blurs. Like a Speedy Gonzales or a Bugs Bunny type, not quite to the level of the Roadrunner, where the legs disappear and just become a bunch of circles, but it's still very much active and moving all over the place. And so then here we have another instance of one of the sterner Toa coming up against one of the more calmer Toa. Of course, Kopaka is very frigid and frozen and frigid, and then we have Gali, who's very much kind of this tranquil lake, to use metaphors that work with their elements. And so then here pretty soon Onua's gonna pop up, and it's like Kopaka is very much okay. Let's get this business. We have a job to do. Let's no time for small talk. Let's actually get this job done and make our way to the city. And then Onua shows up here, and he's actually he's just happy to see other people. He's like, "Oh, hey, you're the buddies that I've told I've got. Hey, it's good to meet you." So Onua's a fun character to voice. So Makuta, I cast myself as Makuta because I wanted that part. It's like it's my show. I can do what I want. I'm gonna voice Makuta. But then with Onua, I more or less wanted to voice Onua out of necessity, just because I definitely wanted an emulation of his voice from the 2015 animations, and I felt like, especially with we've had some adventures trying to get cast recordings going, and so I knew that me actually directing everyone probably wasn't something that was going to be that feasible. I would like for it to be, but everyone's schedule is just always so varied. Even to get one-on-one director, one cast member recordings going is very difficult just because of different schedules. So because of that, I knew that it would be best if I voiced Onua, just because he has a certain type of voice. If I wanted him to say a line one way, then it would be easier if I just did it myself. And so then here we have something that is directly lifted from the 2015 animations, except I do extend it a little bit. Some of the dialogue is word for word, but I do extend it to, because in the 2015 animations, Tahu shows up and he and Kopaka just almost immediately throw down and start fighting, where here there's kind of a natural build-up to them fighting, which felt a little more natural. Because Tahu comes in, he just assumes he's the leader. So I really like that, where he's like, I devised this great plan to stop the skull spiders. I had my protector shoot down a door, and Golly's like, and what else? It's like, no, that was it. And of course Kopaka is like, okay, this guy's an idiot. So of course they immediately start fighting. And actually, if they had gotten into fighting more, I feel like Kopaka probably would have won the fight, because if we watch here in a second, they're about to go at it. And Tahu charges, but Kopaka immediately blocks and counters with his spear. And then Tahu gets back up and charges. They're locked and tussled, and Onua separates them. But if they had continued to fight, Tahu just rushing in all rage, and Kopaka a little more analytical and defensive, he probably would have ended up winning that fight. So just more great line delivery from LJ. Plot twist. And then that shot specifically was kind of lifted straight from the 2015 animations of Pohatu turning around saying, "Hold on, we've got company." Because this is the interesting thing about Pohatu in G2, and that's more or less done. Oh, excuse me, I had yawned. And that's something that's more or less kind of a thing because of the different formats it was told in. But of course, in the 2015 animations, Pohatu has a Australian accent. In Journey to One, that accent is nowhere to be found. So I kind of liked the idea of a couple of at the very least, Pohatu retaining that accent. So that, and I think that was the reason that Jito was the only person to audition for Pohatu, is that I guess there weren't enough people that could do a good enough Australian accent, or even the kind of pop culture movie Australian accent if it isn't completely authentic. So, where was I going with that? I forgot. Right. So yeah, that's. So when I made that choice, I was like, okay, and then so that'll help with continuity between season 1 and season 2, which is going to be retelling the events of Journey to One. It's going to feel like these are the same characters because we got so little character development, or even it's like, what even are some of their characters in the 2015 animations? You can't really tell, and then Journey to One happens. And then we sort of kind of get a glimpse at what their characters are like, but then with Pohatu, it's like, is this the same character? It's like he lost the accent. It's like the accent was really his defining trait in the 2015 animations. So that's something that's nice about retaining a cast all the way through for my 3 seasons that I'm going to do, is that these will by the end it's like they'll feel like developed characters that started in one place and ended up in another. And then of course we get the inclusion here of the Golden Mask of Skull Spiders, which was completely, left out of the 2015 story. It's just a thing that appeared in the Lost set and has been a head scratcher for Bionicle fans. It's like, what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of this? So it's like on the website, I think it was listed. I think it was on the Bionicle website, and it mentioned that it was what Lost used to control the Skull Spider armies. I'm like, okay, good enough for me. That's what I'll use it for too. And so it's just a quick step on it, and then the Skull Spiders just kind of stop because they're not being given commands anymore. And so then the Earthocotans are saved, and then the battle has stopped. And then, and a little different from what happened in the animations where Onua cracks the platform they're on and Lost Falls. But again, because I was still trying to figure out how to work on green screen and effects with green screen, different backgrounds, I decided that it'd be better if Onua picked him up and tossed him off. So Onua still discards of loss, but there is no cracking ground. So then this is really our first appearance of Akimu since the first episode, talking to them via their masks. And so this is something that I wrote into the show because this is one of the questions I had plot wise. Because like I said, 2015 plot wise, it's not a bad plot. You look at the bullet points, like that's not bad. There's stuff to work with there. But I did have a couple questions. One of those is that Ikimu guides the Toa to the city, but then once they get into the city, he just kind of stops. And they have to say, hey, we have to find where Akimu is. Why do you have to find where Akimu is? Can't he just tell you where he is? But he doesn't. Why doesn't he? And they never address that, and so it bugged me, and it bugged me enough that I'm like, okay, this is one of the things I'm gonna remedy. So because of the spell Makuta has over the city to bring back all the skeleton warriors back to life and everything, that is that's what stopped Akimu from. Oh, another yawn, excuse me. And that's what kept Akimu from communicating with the Toa once they entered. A couple different background works here that were a little better because I essentially just took one of the official renderings of the city of the mask makers and just painted over it in Photoshop. So that's why a couple of the shots in this episode look a little better. And this is a little detail I like that I think everyone was probably able to pick up on immediately, but the sound of the Skull Warriors approaching is literally just me raking my hands through a big bin of Lego. I thought that was just a nice, it'd just be a fun little touch. It's like, I need some sort of sound design. They're made of bones. It's like, oh, why don't I just rub my hands through, drag my fingers through my big bucket of Lego I've got. It's like, that'll work. And it did. It worked very well. It's a very identifiable noise. So I don't think it's really that distracting. It's just kind of ha, I know what that is.
Let's break some bones.
And so then we have a fight. So pretty much exactly not exactly the same. Oh, I should not be doing this recording so late, and even then it's not that late. It's just now 9 o'clock. Ugh. Must have been a big day. But so like in the 2015 animations, they of course have to fight off the skeleton warriors. But I added the thing is that since they're mindless drones, essentially you can break them apart, and the pieces are gonna find their way right back to each other. Which added a little extra danger because that was kind of the big problem with the skeleton warriors in G2 is that, well, first of all, they're seen in like the one episode and then they're never seen again in the rest of the G2 in the 2015 animations, and then they show up for like half a second in Journey to 1. They're quickly beaten, and then that's that. So the skeleton warriors never really seemed like a threat. So having them be able to reform themselves with their parts seemed like a nice way to kind of add a little bit more danger to them. And of course, then if this were the official Bionicle story as it had been told in 2015, then that would have given kids incentive to break apart their toys and then rebuild them. Because it's like, oh, no, it's like, oh, but we can't stop them because it would have been a nice little play thing for kids to do. It's like, that's another thing I tried to do at this show in certain ways is kind of think, it's like, okay, if I were in charge of telling this story in 2015 and 2016 and 2017, and I had these, and I knew these were toys, and it's like, how would I kind of work in the fact that they were toys into the plot? And so the skeleton warriors were kind of the biggest thing. It's like, okay, that's kind of a thing because they are Lego. People that say Construction isn't Lego, it's like, what's wrong with you? Of course they're Lego. The logo is on the box, for Pete's sake. I mean, CCBS can be used with system. And it's like that. I mean, you can't attach a brick, but I mean, there's ways. Have you seen a Lego mech from Lego Marvel in the last couple of years? They use CCBS. So that was one of the ways I was like, yeah, they're toys. So that's. Now, when I say that, yes, they're toys, let's not get some conspiracy theories going. It was like, oh, I'm tying this into the Lego movie universe. Let's not go there, because that's definitely not what's happening. But because the Toa, if Pohatu's arm were to be cut off, then it would not be I can just reattach it. It would not be a thing like that, because there's the idea that the skeleton warriors, that's what they are. They are skeleton warriors. Because of course, Bionicle characters are bioorganic. That's, excuse me, bioorganic. That's the same thing. They're biotechnological. Again, I should not be doing this late because now I'm forgetting words. But they are a mix of biological and technological, biomechanical. That's the word I was looking for. It's like most of them are biomechanical. So if they were to lose an arm, that would be the same as a human having their arm cut off. There probably just wouldn't be blood. But with the skeleton warriors and Kulta and Slicer and Basher, it's like they have lost the bio in their mechanical. Now they're just mechanical. So that is Exit in the Okotan script. I think it was the first graphic novel that was released had an Okotan alphabet. Um, had an Okotan alphabet in the back of it, and so I was able to find that online and use that. And so then that was Exit. So they found the Exit. I was talking about biomechanics a minute ago when Lewa passed it, but one of those broken slabs back there that had the different games on one of them was a Thornax fruit from 2009. Take that reference as you will. That's just a visual reference. I'm not necessarily certain that's canon to the G2 world. Well, maybe Thornax are. Maybe that's what the that's what did I call them? I forgot. The berries that Lewa likes, that the Zockberries. Maybe that's what Zockberries are in G2. It's like they are Thornax. They just call it something different because they would never have known to call them Thornax, because this is not Bear Magna, obviously. So this slicer fight's probably one of the better fights in the show. It's I think the best one of season 1. Season 2 actually I think has a lot of great fights, just because I had progressed in being able to know what I could do with some of these figures. But I think the best fight in this first season is the Kulta fight at the end. That lost fight was good too. But the slicer fight there I thought was pretty well handled. I actually went back and I added more to that because I realized how short it was. And even then, seeing it in finished animation, it's still kind of short. But as we know from having seen season 2, that's not the end of Slicer. So he does get more to do, and I had always planned that from the start, that Slicer was going to come back. So that's why I was kind of okay with his fight being a little shorter. So then, of course, in the 2015 animations, the arena collapses. So I have it collapse on them here too. And then, of course, in the 2015 animations, then they spend, for whatever reason, an entire episode just kind of recapping the entire year up to that point. And so when I watched that compilation of all the episodes combined with redundancies mixed out, they fall down in the hole and they get out almost immediately. It's like, it's like, hang on, how did this happen? We're smarter than this. And then it's like, hey, can we get out of here? And then they get out of there. It's like, oh, that was kind of pointless. So I kept it. Of course, they don't lament the whole time that they're down there. I add some stuff to it, to where it's actually an obstacle that they have to overcome in some interesting ways. Of course, visually, it didn't turn out the best. Because like I've been saying, there were just I just hadn't figured out how to do some things yet. So the idea here is that Onua and Pohatu are working together to kind of move to make the hole they're in a little larger. So now they're stuck down in this hole, and then of course in the 2015 animations you just see a gravestone go flying in the air and the Toa pop out of it. But so it's like, well, they were really far underground. Is that it? They just so easily are able to find their way out. So I decided to devote the first little bit in this episode to them actually figuring out how to get out of the hole. So it's a good opportunity for Onua to have some teamwork in the episode. Onua and Pohatu working together, because their elements are similar. And so that's the thing, is that Earth and Stone have always been so similar. I tried to make a distinction between the two. Is that Stone directly, Pohatu can move stones and do stuff with stone, where with Onua, he can feel, he can control the earth, the dirt, and then like when he puts his hand to the ground, he can actually feel the dirt, and then if he feels like there's a big opening, then there would be like a big boulder or something in the middle of the ground that he wouldn't be able to lift, but Pohatu would, and Onua would kind of be able to pinpoint it for him. So that's kind of some distinctions I tried to make between earth and stone, because to someone that's not overly familiar with Bionicle, it's like maybe they know the elements, but well, what's the difference between earth and stone? Because other media that has used elements, sometimes earth and stone are the exact same thing. For instance, Lego Ninjago. We see the Waste of Space himself, Cole, use his earth powers, and he does stuff with rocks. It's like, well, by Bionicle standards, you should be having the element of stone, not the element of earth. But whatever, it's a different franchise. They can do what they want there. But in Bionicle, of course, earth and stone are two distinct things. And so then here we actually get the Skull Scorpios, and then now it actually serves as a callback to a previous episode, instead of just being this out of the blue random, oh hey, here's a Lego set you can buy, and it's like now it's a hey, it's a callback and a Lego set you can buy or could buy, since when this episode came out, if you wanted to buy that set, it'd probably be really expensive on the aftermarket. So Lewa charges in, and then in kind of true Lewa fashion, for the first couple years of Bionicle, he gets his tail handed to him. It's like poor G1 Lewa, he had his mask corrupted by the Rahi, and then he had a Krana on his face. It's like Lewa had a bad time in G1, so Lewa gets taken out of this fight pretty fast. And so this is something that I haven't touched on yet, but it's something I did in this first season, is that Tahu comes in here and starts being kind of boastful about being leader, and so then in the 2015 animations, they're like, well, we should have a vote, but then Lost shows up, and then they just kind of continue on, and then they kind of bicker among themselves the entire time. So in this season, I kind of had this idea of building up to Tahu actually taking over and actually becoming the leader, and so this idea, because I kind of got the idea for this from Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, where they're like, oh well, we have to vote for who's going to be king in the Brethren Court. It's like, and everyone's like, oh, and Elizabeth's like, well, what's wrong with the vote? It's like, well, the problem is we're pirates. We're only going to vote for ourselves, and of course Jack votes for Elizabeth and throws the whole thing off. So I kind of had that idea. I had that idea to do that here. Is that and Pohatu brings it up. He's like, well, we're just going to vote for ourselves. And then Lee was like, I don't want to be a leader. I'll vote for someone else. So they end up taking turns. They end up taking turns being leader. It's like, well, let's actually see who could be best. So we'll take turns. So this part here with the Skull Scorpios, it kind of ended up being Pohatu's turn to be leader. But then, of course, and it ends up being pointed out next episode that in each of these situations, Tahu kind of ends up proving his leadership material and why he should be leader. Unknowingly as well. It's like none of them really realize that Tahu's proving himself until it's like, well, you've actually helped us out of each of these situations. You are the best to be leader. You are the best suited to be leader. So then here we are at Kimu's tomb, the only physical set in the entire show, and the only time all 6 Toa are on screen together without some sort of digital trickery. So then up on the wall was another cameo by the Unity Duty Destiny symbol from G1. So then the reason this set exists is that when I was a senior in high... Was I senior? No. No, I was a junior. I was a junior in high school, excuse me. It was my second semester junior year. So the second semester of my junior year in high school, I took a stop motion class, an actual stop motion class. And well, maybe it wasn't. Wait. Yeah, no, it was I'm in college now. It's been so long since high school I've forgotten. So I think it was actually maybe even No, yeah, it was I'm sorry. It was my second semester of my senior year of high school, because I took a stop motion, because that was the semester I took a stop motion class. And we had to do something for the final project. So So when that final project was coming around, that was when Journey to One was first coming out, and so I was getting really excited. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm gonna recap the 2015 story really quick and do that as my final project. So most of my energy for that final project was spent on doing a couple different backgrounds, and then I brought them back with me and then filmed everything in my home studio. And so then that was stuff that was left over from that project. It sort of kind of ended up becoming a pilot for Bionicle Reiterated, because it was so when I did season 1 of Reiterated, it was actually the second time I had gone through retelling the 2015 story, except with that school project, it ended up being a little less than 10 minutes long, I think. So then that was really, so that was an early experience of green screen, and honestly, it's also one of the reasons why season 1, the graphics in season 1 look as good as they do. Is because because the little bit prior experience I had with green screen was because of this school project. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're curious at this point, when you're done watching this video, you can go and search on my channel Bionicle Trials on Okoto. That was like, I couldn't think of a good name for it, so that was kind of the generic title I came up with. And so nowadays I treat that as the pilot to Reiterated, because for those of you that have been longtime Bionicle fans, you may remember the 2008 recap video that went over 2001, 2007, and introduced the Fantoka, the Toa Fantoka and Makuta Fantoka. The final battle is about to begin with Gravity Hurts playing in the background. That was really what I based Trials of Okoto off of, except it was recapping the 2015 story. So there wasn't really any dialogue in that. It was mostly just a narrator voiceover, and of course Gravity Hurts was playing in the background. So that was so that it's interesting to look back on that kind of as a pilot to Reiterate it. It's like, interesting. And so then that set for Kimu's Tomb I just kept, because it's like, I made it for this one thing and I still have it. Let's reuse it. And also it also had the actual prop I made for Kimu's sarcophagus. So it's like, well, let's go ahead and reuse these. And so now we have found the Mask of Creation, but Makuta's forces have closed in on them, and so Kimu's learning that his brother has actually turned evil and not just been corrupted by the Mask of Ultimate Power. He is legitimately, of his own volition, turned evil. And so this is something else that I kind of had a question about with the 2015 story, is that Makuta sends Kulta and his forces to get the Mask of Creation, and the Protectors, of course, tell the Toa that they have to find the Mask of Creation and awaken Kimu, and Kimu can save them with the Mask of Creation. But the Protectors act like the Mask of Creation is lost. Actually, I think they do say the Mask of Creation is lost, and Kimu is asleep. But then Kimu knows where it was, and because we don't really ever see where the Mask of Creation was hiding. It seemed like that oh, well, hold on, maybe so I'm just now remembering. So there's that one moment after Loss is defeated in the 2015 animations, and there's that bear pedestal, and Pohatu says, I wonder what used to sit there. Was that them saying that's where the Mask of Creation was? Is that them saying that's where the Mask of Creation was, and then Kulta and his forces came through and snatched it, but it took them that long to warm up the forge to melt it? If that is, then obviously that could have been written better, because I'm just now figuring that out. Because I wonder if anyone else has thought of that before, because I've always thought that an odd moment. I thought that was kind of a sly reference to the Golden Mask of Skull Spiders. So regardless, having the Mask of Creation being a little more hidden, and then Kulta and his forces getting it this way, I thought that is better than how the 2015 animations did it, and interesting.
It's old.
So yeah, so then now we're on the last episode. The the end of episode 8 and the beginning of episode 9 flow together really, really well. And so the first half of this episode, this is also the longest episode of the season, running at, I think, 16 minutes, because the first half of this episode is essentially just Ikimu expositing and giving a bunch of exposition and backstory and all that stuff. And so this was a prime opportunity for me to use the 2015 animations as kind of as a vision, as the vision he sees when he puts on the Mask of Time. But of course, I like how that turned out, because of course, hey, that's actually some good animation. I thought that was a good use of the 2015 animations. But there are some other problems with this, because the first half of this episode is because the original idea, and I talked to a couple different artists about this, it was to have most of these flashback things, drawn out, of course. And so then here's what Okoto looked like before the different regions took over. And so like all of these different, I think we're about to get one right here. No, sorry. First we're getting actual animation, but then some of these would have been kind of these drawings, and we'll get some of them because I ended up having to do most of them because I talked to a couple different artists and none of them had the time, and then I managed to find one who was able to spare some time, and his name was Z Nook, ZCEENOOK, and he managed to deliver one, but then his schedule changed, then he wasn't able to do the rest of them. So like this one right here, I had to do this one on my own in Photoshop, and it didn't turn out that great, unfortunately, because I was running out of I ran out of time. It's like look at that Fire Okoten right there. Look how janky that Fire Okoten looks. So unfortunately, I had to do most of these on my own. But the one that he was able to deliver, I thought turned out really well. And I wish that his schedule hadn't that he hadn't had schedule conflicts, because look at that, that looks so great. I wish that he had been able to deliver more like this, because I really got the idea from kind of using these pictures from Transformers Prime. And for those of you that have seen Transformers Prime, you probably immediately know what I'm talking about, where it happens mainly at the end of season 1 and beginning of season 2. Yeah, that sounds about right. Because one of them is the big one that I always think of is when Ratchet is giving the Optimus Prime and Megatron backstory, and you kind of see these semi-motion, but also kind of still matte paintings that are very beautiful, and they're obviously animated paintings, and they're not animated digital paintings, and not actual animation. So that was the idea for these here, and so that, of course, here we give the backstory to Kolta. Now, for those of you that have read all of the chapter books, you could probably tell that I went in a different direction with the Skull villains than the books did. I decided to go in a different direction with the backstory for the Skull villains than the books did because honestly I forgot those second and third books existed for a while, and then I think I was either in the middle of writing or I'd already finished writing the first season, and then I think someone made a mention to it on TTV or on the message boards or something. I'm like, oh yeah, those second and third books exist. Oh, I may need to add to Reiterated here. And so I went and I didn't read those books, but I looked at the synopses for both of those, and I went, oh, those are really stupid. I don't like those explanations for what happened to Loss or what the Skull villains are. I did not like those. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm changing this. So that's why I decided to change that. And so then here we have it's not actually our first mention of the elemental creatures in this season. So that's something I also wanted to do, is mention the creatures a couple times, so that way they don't just sort of kind of come out of nowhere in the second season and start seeding them early. And so then So that way, when it comes to season 2, it's like, oh yes, these elemental creatures. So that way, if anyone had never seen any Bionicle before and were watching this, which I don't think anyone really is probably, but in the future maybe someone does stumble upon it. That way they're like, oh yeah, elemental creatures. I wonder what these things are, and then we get to see them in the show. And so you kind of know, so you kind of have an idea of what to expect, but not. So then here we have the actual use of the 2015 animations. I've always liked the animation in these. The animation, like Journey to One had good animation. The 2015 story had good animations. It's like the story, but the story just didn't back it up. So it's like so the vision of things to come. It's like and then pair it with the music from Legends of Metro Nui, where Vakama has his final vision in the film, and I think the sequence just works really well. And then here we have the group shot. There's the Toa, and then kind of their 2015 animation silhouettes, and then the top half of the Mask of Time. So this is something I didn't bring up earlier when we saw the Mask of Time for the first time in the first episode. Oh, it's and the Mask of Time book ends the season. It's in the first episode. It's in the last episode of the season. Is that that Mask of Time design is from Shapeways. I think because Cyberhand 100% did the Mask of Ultimate Power, Mask of Time. I'm trying to remember if he the Cyberhand did the Mask of Ultimate Power right there with Makuta. I'm trying to remember if he also did the Mask of Time. I think he did that Mask of Time as well. So it was nice to be able to actually have a physical version of that. So then, of course, here's where Makuta ends up being transformed into a hideous monster. And then, of course, as we know, Ikimu has to knock the mask off of his face, and then it splits. And so then that's kind of set up for season 3. The mask splits into 6 pieces, and then Makuta gets sucked into a vortex into the Shadow Realm, and then Ikimu is severely weakened, and then there's a big explosion, and then the elemental creatures come by, and so that's our actual first appearance of the creatures, and then. And we've come full circle. That's the beginning of the first episode. We've seen this, and then we fade back to present day. So I really like all of that backstory. Some of the digital paintings I did could have been better, but oh well, it is what it is. But overall, I really like all that because Ikimu does kind of hold out on them for a while. And the audience kind of left with some questions, especially since I changed some things from the official G2 canon. So I think the stuff I changed works better for the show. So this is something that I haven't brought up yet. But Golly was an interesting figure to work with, because I mentioned that Skull Slicer was a fun toy to work with. Golly was an interesting figure to work with because, and I think this is what ended up making me think that Golly Uniter is a better toy than Golly Master, is that Golly Master's arms would fall out occasionally. Because they're constructed a little differently from the others. So Golly Master's arms would fall out occasionally, which would be annoying. And then, of course, her eyes would then be completely keyed out, because she could only be on green screen. And then the eyes used there are just green enough to where they'd get keyed out. So for some reason, it only happened with Golly. None of the other Toa had that problem. So with Golly, instead of just letting her have transparent eyes, I had to go through and add in the yellow eyes for every shot she was in. Well, not every shot she was in, because like that one a moment ago, she wasn't turned toward the camera, so you couldn't actually see her eyes. So that of course was fine. So this I think is a nice story character moment, because they've figured out that Tahu is the best leader, is the best one to be leader, and it's coming from Kopaka, because Kopaka has actually been studying all of this, and he's like, Tahu's the one that's beginning us out of these situations. He was a little arrogant about it at first, but he actually is the best one to be leader out of all of us. So I feel like that coming from Kopaka, because, you know, it's like, if you know anything about Bionicle, Kopaka and Tahu don't really typically ever get along. So for that to come from Kopaka, I thought was a nice little story character moment. And so then, of course, we come to the Skull Basher versus Toa fight. Of course, in the official 2015 story, very, very short, as in he knocks out Onua, and then they just immediately pummel him through the door, and then that's it. Now, when writing this, I decided to give them for them to have more of a fight with him, but I realized that having a short fight with Basher actually does make sense pacing-wise, because you don't have a long, prolonged battle with Basher and then immediately go and have a big, prolonged battle with Grinder or Kulta. It makes sense for it to be a shorter fight, but the fight in the official story was so short. It was comical. So here, the Basher does put up a little bit of a fight, but the combined might of the Toa does prove to be too much for him, and so then he's not powerful enough. So they do quickly overcome him, but there was a little bit more of a fight there. So then here we have the actual big boss battle, and so then Kulta does put up a very good fight because the Mask of Control does give him a power boost. And so then this does prove to be almost too much for the Toa, and as we'll see here in a minute, they actually do end up getting defeated, because that's as it happened in the 2015 animations. Except again here, it's longer than it was in the 2015 animation, because it's like one swing of his weapon, and they're all demasked. But then here, he kind of systematically takes them down one by one. Onua's first, Gallia's second. And then I made sure to make the point of him throwing the mask into the forge to melt down the masks, instead of just having them fly off and get cracked and broken. And so he loses an arm. Tahu and Kopaka are fighting on a united front, but you know, they can't. And then I thought that would just be fun to have Kulta still have control of his arm. And because, as we saw with the Warriors, they're able to put themselves back together. Now, there is a distinction between Kulta, Grinder, that's a Transformer, between Kulta, Grinder, and Slicer. It's that they can actually die again. It's like they can, as long as their head remains attached to their bodies, they live. But the second they lose that, then they die again. So, as we saw with Kulta there, he was able to resummon his arm, but but Basher stayed out of the fight pretty easily, or pretty quickly, because, well, Leewood decapitated him. And so then the same thing happens with Slicer in season 2. Spoilers, but again, you probably should have seen it by now. And then Kulta flies against the wall, and all his pieces go flying. His head is no longer attached, so whatever life force he had, thanks to the magic spell, the dark magic spell that Makuta was using, that is now no longer has an effect on him, and so he is dead again. And so then here we have the introduction of the Toa Uniter masks on the Toa, because so the other masks are destroyed. Ikimu is going to make perfect copies of those masks and then make new mask designs and replace them in a very short time span. No, that doesn't make sense. Just have the new masks speed the Toa Uniter masks, and then he makes them new armor as well down the line. It's just that the masks are the first to come. So then here we have this is really something that I used at the end of the pilot. Is that I did that as well. It's like, that'd be kind of a cool idea. And also, I just wanted to see how the characters would look with the 2015 characters would look with their 2016 masks. And so that was something I carried over. It's like, that's a good idea. So then here we are at the end of the first season. It was quite a ride making this first season, and I can't wait for you guys to see the rest of season 2 and what I have in store for season 3 when that comes. So I'm not going to be giving you guys any hints or anything. But just to say that hopefully the rest of season 2 will be out sometime in, I'm going to say, late March to play it safe, and later if it does take a little longer. But that will be it for this video. So thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.